you know, it's people like the 3 medical doctors, in the case that we just heard, as well as the nursing students, you know, really pillars in our community, people who are willing to go against administration that have really made way for people like myself. So I thank you for taking that step.
I won't take a microphone because I speak really loud and the microphone freaks me out. First off, my name is Paige. I'm the VP Communications at the SFO, and I almost had my term. Really quickly, I would like to take the time to thank you both, as well as the folks from the Black History Month Committee for having, and as well as for coming and having this space. I think at the Student Federation, we always talk about student space, how to create more space, and this is definitely one, even though there is massive security around and the lights are really dim and we can't even see half of our faces. For sure, this is a space that we need to continue to have. I just wanted to speak a bit on, and this is a few comments I'd like to make. You know, Mika spoke about getting into office, and it was really funny when I ran my first time, and I remember calling my mom at 2 a.m. crying because I won my elections. She was like, "Yeah, that's great, you know, good for you for being a Black woman elected, but if you're not going to do shit, it's not worth being a Black woman there." So I think that's something I really took back, and I think, you know, not just to go in and get elected, but actually doing something and actually creating, you know, committees, creating spaces. Minka was on the board creating motions for us to be able to recognize them when Black people are gone, when racialized people are gone, for there to be a continuum. The other thing I just wanted to comment was we talked a lot about getting active in political work and getting elected. And I think it's really important that a lot of times we forget that grassroots movements are also folks that aren't necessarily elected but are doing a lot of stuff. A lot of times folks devalue the work of grassroots movement, and I think without the work of grassroots movement we wouldn't be here. We as a society wouldn't be here. And I think the other thing too is elections are really expensive. A lot of folks don't have the means to, you know, buy themselves their ways into elections, and a lot of those folks do come from, are folks from families from lower income, and that are folks from racialized or marginalized communities. So, you know, just putting that into prospect, it does relate with something we at the SFO talk a lot about, which is tuition fees. You know, a lot of times we're looking around, how come, you know, racialized students aren't that much into this beautiful system of education? Well, tuition fees are a huge factor, and especially for the fact that, and I see some people laughing because I talk about tuition fees all the time. Well, yeah, it's a student issue, and we have to talk about it, and we have to talk about the racialized impact of tuition fees, especially in a Black History Month context. So if you would be able to also speak on the access of education, especially for the fact that here in Canada it is a barrier to racialized communities and folks from marginalized communities, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
There's probably no more appropriate place to talk about access to education than here at an institution for education. And first of all, I'd say that my cousin, who's probably in her late 20s, is $120,000 in debt. And she has graduated with a master's in social work. And she's got to pay that back as a student loan. It is absolutely ridiculous that a society would place a banker in between a student and a professor. And of course, that is a huge barrier to having minority students. I'm looking at a document dated November 15, 2008, that seems to me to have made a huge omission, and it is a result of the document of 2008 that was written by the Student Appeal Center, yes, SAC. But the one thing that's not in here is the minority students, which is what the Student Appeal Center document was all about. And so I don't know what the statistics are for students of color here at this institution. So maybe you could help with that in terms of maybe approximate percentage or numbers. Do you have an idea? No?
If it's reflective of society, there's about 15% of Canada's population that is visible minority. And so, you know.
Okay, so University of Ottawa would be about 15%? Okay.
I think it's important to mention that we wouldn't have those statistics. However, speaking on how we can move forward, I think it's something we can call upon the university, who prides itself on being bilingual, while also figuring out who are the students that are here in the institution. And to make a little context, a lot of students here that are francophone are also original. So I think it would be important for the university to have it in here.
So is it that the university doesn't keep statistics?
Well, I think the university, as well as our dear governments, are asking questions. It's something that everybody should be asking questions, whether it's the university itself, whether it's the provincial government, whether it's the federal government. I think we all have a responsibility, and I think if we want to move forward and if we want to fix problems, well, we would know the factors.
You can't fix a problem if you don't really know what the problem is and who the problem affects.
The only way you'll know is that every student, when they register, there would have to be a self-identification form where you put down on the application that you are a member of a group, and that includes Asians, Chinese, Japanese, and it goes all across African, East Asian, etc. And you would have to self-identify in order for them to come. I don't know if they do that. I mean, the last time I was here 35 years ago, they weren't asking.
So do they ask now?
From my understanding, when the November 2008 Student Appeal Center report was written, one of the findings was that 71% of their cases were people of color that used their services, which is high. And so when McKinney, the director of the Student Appeal Center, tried to contact the administration to find out what is the population percentage of racialized students on campus, and she wasn't given any response at all. So whether they have that statistics or not, we're not really privy to that.
They have them in approaches. I went for student center, we asked for some of that data, but I went to it, and they won't release it. They release certain pieces, certain people, but not the whole thing.
That's very interesting. And so how can you address perceived racism or discrimination if you have no way of knowing? But there's one thing that you do know, and that is from your 2008 document, that 71% number is there and it's inescapable. So what should an administration that receives a document like that do in response? I read through the list of recommendations, and that was one thing I wanted to ask. Have these recommendations been acted upon? Well, then it looks like the students have the opportunity to form the same kind of multicultural coalition that got the three of you elected to office to then speak to their own document that they produced. And they haven't even lived up to the recommendations that they have produced. So if that is the case, then the students can organize around that.
There is one thing, though, that has come out of the report, which is former professor Minnie Holmes. That's literally the only thing that's come out of the report. So I just wanted to make mention of that.
Well, I guess everyone here, you all are far more up to speed than me on what's going on at University of Ottawa, right? And so you know about the situation of the Grand Cour, right? Yes, you all know. So I've got a lot of learning and reading to do. And what I would say is that I am more than happy to sort of mentor from afar on ways in which the students can organize, but you know, you all know how to organize. But clearly, for even this event to be treated the way it was by the administration means that there's something that's not quite right. And I don't think I've ever I've been to universities all over the world. And I've never been called a security threat or intimated to be if it wasn't said outright. Just because students want to come together with the community and talk about things. It's never, and we've got our security people here, and the woman who was here, but we've got the gentleman who's back there. And have you seen any security problems? Thank you very much. Because we aren't a security problem. We are the people who want peace and justice. And we stand for human dignity for everybody in the human family. The members of the press who did come, and to thank the members of the security who could attest to the fact that this was a peaceful assembly, and all we did was share with each other and learn from each other. That's all we did. And we also thank the organizers for bringing us together, but we thank the University of Ottawa administration for at least, how can I say, the rotunda is a nice place in which to gather. We have occupied the rotunda tonight. Thank you.
One more question for Mr. Joseph Hickey. Oh.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Cynthia, as a white student, I'd like to hear your advice about what I can do to make a difference.
I knew that question was going to come up, and I'm so glad you asked it. The question is, what can white students do? Because here's the whole point. These black students can't do it alone. But you know what? You need to know how racism operates. You need to understand just a little bit what it is that they talk about when they're talking about racism, or what my professor is talking about when she writes about everyday racism. This was her dissertation that became a book. And so I would say that the best thing that white students can do, or the white community in general can do, is to interact with other white folk and also interact with everybody else. Learn from all of us and carry that inside you as a part of your being.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is the end of the night. I want to thank you guys all for coming and being participant audience members, making comments, questions, and very respectful to everyone in this room. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you very much, Cynthia McKinney, for coming all the way in the snow and for coming to speak to us, share with us, being so warm, even under these conditions. And we apologize for having to not have a room and having more of a warm official welcome for you.
Beautiful.
And I want to take this time to thank you. She's been working very hard to make this
Merci d'être venu et merci aux organisateurs de la saison.
Group picture, so a family picture.